Right. So what needs investigation is our suffering, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so as I was investigating it deeper and deeper and deeper, it amazed me to what depth it goes and the degree to which our emotional responses uh, are actually conditioned by the past, and the degree to which our emotional reactions uh, actually are coming from the past. But there is nothing more impactful than an open heart,
Mhm.
an open, compassionate heart that does not judge, that understands. That is by itself a tremendously healing force because it gives the person a permission to apply the same understanding and the same non-judgment to oneself. It shows them that it's possible.
Hi, everyone. Today I'm sitting down to a conversation with Artem Boytsov. I was just practicing my pronunciation of his last name. Hi, Artem.
Hello, Maggie Gilovich.
Thank you. Yes, we
You're
were
welcome.
practicing each other's last names. Yeah, the pronunciation, which is great. And so I'm really looking forward to this conversation. The first time I came across you, it was actually through Frank Young. I basically saw a conversation with Frank, and Frank was also a guest on the channel. A couple of times now,
I
and
saw.
yeah, and so hi Frank, by the way, if you're watching.
Yeah, hello, Frank, if you're watching
Yeah,
this.
I just love talking to him so much. It's such joy. And so I simply remembered the feeling. I really enjoyed your conversation with Frank. I think there were also two, actually. It was quite a while ago. And I remember thinking, like, I'm just so curious to hear about your journey and to know more about, just you as a person, and how the journey basically unfolded for you, how you even ended up on the awakening path in the first place. So on your website, one of the things that I saw as like almost like a first line in your bio was you mentioning that there was a very difficult period that you were going through in 2017. So I was wondering whether that would be a good starting point, unless there's something even before that that you might wish to go back to.
Yeah, I'll get to it. I'll start from the very beginning. So first of all, it's great to be here, Maggie. Thank you very much for having me. I'm flattered. But when I heard that you were curious about my journey, so it would be my pleasure to talk about this. And yeah, I've been following your work to some extent too. I really like what you're doing. I really like the name of the channel. I think it's extremely important, the human aspect of the awakening, the most overlooked one.
Thank
So,
you.
so certainly I'm looking forward to a very productive and interesting conversation with you.
Thank you.
All right, so let me start from the very beginning, as I already threatened to in this conversation. So I was born in 1977 in Soviet Russia. I'm 48 years old, and uh, and as a teenager, I lived through the collapse of Soviet Union. That was an extraordinary violent time, a very tumultuous time. So I saw a lot of violence. I also served in Russian military, believe it or not, and I saw uh, also violence there, which was even bordering on torture and lots of very nasty and ugly stuff. So as a child, I was actually a very insecure and fearful child due to specifics of my parents' upbringing and also, just the culture of the country. I mean, human culture is rather universal, but Russian culture is more strict and barbaric than a lot of them.
Yeah.
Of course, it would be incorrect to compare it to, for example, some fundamentalist Islamic countries, but it's still like compared to the Western countries, it's pretty raw. And so as a child, my escape was math and computers, and so I found myself to be very intelligent. I mean, if talking about one part of intelligence specifically, which is like the technical intelligence, the ability to see
Hmm.
patterns and things like that. So I was very good at math. I was kind of a uh, I guess I wouldn't call myself a prodigy, obviously, because I'm an adult now and now I understand what it really means. But in the eyes of a lot of teachers,
Hmm.
I was something like that. So I was very respected and adored by many teachers, and as a consequence, I was very despised by many of my classmates. So I had a very difficult childhood from that regard. I was physically weak. I was bullied very frequently, and there was a big gap between my ability to understand math and physics and other people. And so when I was a teenager, this quickly evolved into my interest in computers. And at that time, there were, I mean, it was very different than today. So today, geeks are cool, but as I say, as I say sometimes, geeks became cool when they became rich. So
Right.
back then, I mean, geeks were actually also looked at mostly condescendingly, and so some kind of weird guys tinkering with their computers. And back then in Soviet Union, there was very few possibilities. So I taught myself. I went to libraries and taught this stuff myself to the best of my ability. And then I also ended up uh, serving in the military because it was very difficult for me to stay in a university because it was I have always struggled with depressions and as a result of everything that I've been through, and it was very difficult for me to actually pay attention to things that don't interest me. So I
Hmm.
only wanted to study what interests me, and I actually got kicked out of a few universities, even though I was at an extraordinary high level with regards to computer science, more knowledgeable than most of the teachers there, and also it's not only a testament to my interest, but it's also a testament to the weakness of Russian education about it at this point. Like if I were at Stanford, I wouldn't be able to say that, of course.
Yeah.
But that's what it was. So I got kicked out of a few universities. So I went to the army, and when I got back, so computers and math, it was basically my escape. So many people would be able to relate to that. For many geeks and people who are into those things, it serves as a sort of escape from how painful people are.
Hmm.
So that was my case as well. I was kind of a social reject. I was very unsuccessful with women. Girls didn't want me, and so that was kind of my only thing to do.
Yeah.
And so when I got out of the army, I started working on moving to the United States. It took me a lot of time. That was my dream. It was back in the time where, as I said, it was very difficult time. So back then, companies like Google and Microsoft, and they didn't have offices in Russia. It was very difficult to emigrate to the United States. So it was a project. It was a big project. It took me like a few years to do that. I was like sending resume
Oh,
every
yeah.
day, and then people would be interested, and then they would have it was actually quite funny. We would have an interview, and they would be, yes, we want to hire you. By the way, where are you? And I would say St. Petersburg, Russia, and they were, oh, no, sir. I of course didn't lead with that, so I had a lot of it took me a very long time, but in 2004, I was 27 years old. I actually succeeded doing this, and so I was hired by a small company that specialized in hiring Russian engineers at half price, and I couldn't stay there for a very long time, and I started looking for a job here in the United States already. That was much easier to transfer H-1B visa than to acquire a new one, and Google hired me. So Google hired me in 2004. That was a kind of an important pivotal point of my life. And so I worked at Google for 7 years. So I worked as a
Hmm.
software engineer in research. I don't know if you're familiar with Google Trends. Uh,
No?
no, so some people are. It's a tool that shows you the interest, the graph of search traffic interest over time.
Oh, okay.
So I launched that with another engineer. So I had a good time at Google for about 7 years, and then I actually tried to start my own company, but it failed. So I was even running a startup as a CEO and founder, but it failed in about 3 years. And then right after it failed, that's where I had my last depression. Like some people would call it the dark night of the soul.
Hmm.
It was like the biggest, baddest depression that you can imagine because basically by that point of time, I was in this peculiar position. Uh, I lived through something that uh, by the US standards could be described as abject poverty in the Soviet Union. And then I went to the US and I got into Google and I achieved some level of monetary success, more than most people.
Hmm.
That didn't bring me happiness. So I was, as I said, when I was a teenager, I was very unsuccessful with women. But as I was in my 30s, I started developing some self-confidence, and I also had resources, so that helped. And then also started looking much better. Not that I'm particularly attractive, but certainly much better when I was a teenager. And I became successful with women, quite successful. I mean, not in terms of relationships. That's another issue entirely. I mean, if you want
Right.
to live with somebody in a long-term relationship, that's a very, I mean, I've been married for 10 years. That's a very different issue. But at least in terms of like being able to get with very beautiful women, women that when I was a teenager, I would think would be completely
Out of your
unaccessible.
league. Yeah,
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 exactly, precisely,
yeah.
right. So I reached the point where I could honestly and authentically say to myself that there is no woman, however she looks like, that would be out of my league. So I had a lot of kind of confidence. That was still not authentic confidence, if we're
Hmm.
talking about enlightenment, because deep down I was still very insecure. But at least I sort of developed the strategies, so to speak,
Yes.
right? And I was no longer afraid.
Yeah.
And that didn't bring me happiness. And then I tried to start a company to become rich, and I thought maybe if I become very rich and successful and known in the IT sphere, then this would bring me happiness. And this didn't work out either. So I was kind of at the end of my rope, you see.
Right. Yeah,
I
yeah.
was I was at the place where I had absolutely no freaking idea what could possibly bring me happiness because I've been rich, I've been poor, I've been unsuccessful with women, I've been successful with women, I had failed relationships, a couple of divorces. The kind of the career didn't take off the way that I thought it should for me, you know. And I was basically I kind of had a feeling that this life isn't going anywhere,
Hmm.
you know. And at that point, I have always been prone to depressions. I spent half of my now it's very obvious to me why. As I went through this very long and deep transformative process of healing. But I was always very prone to depressions. I spent maybe half of my life in depressions. And uh, by about 2015, 2016, when I closed my companies, I just had no idea what to do at all. So I basically at that point of time, I think about 2016 or something like that, by that point of time, I wound up my company, still had some savings, and I just said to myself, I'm just gonna travel and have as much sex as possible, and I just don't care. I just don't care. I have no idea what to do anymore. And so at about that time, I actually discovered the psychedelic scene.
Mm-hmm.
So I discovered I met a guy who was very much into psytrance, and now of course I understand that it's all about the same thing, but back then I didn't, and so I started going to those outdoor psytrance festivals where people would take LSD and dance uh, uh, for hours in a kind of a dance trance, it's in a meditative trance. So, and I kind of started doing the same, and I didn't even understand why it felt so good. And now, of course, I do. Uh, but I also went to Burning Man, so I kind of got into this psychedelic culture, and I was at the point of my life where after this huge depression, when my company was winding down with a lot of lots of suicidal ideation and a lot of anxiety, and this is where I actually took even some anti-anxiety meds for the very first time in my life.
Mm-hmm. That's 2017 where you
No,
reached
no,
that tipping point, or not yet?
No, I think the worst depression was I think it was 2016.
Mm-hmm.
No, maybe 2015, 2016, something like that. So I founded my company in 2013, and it lasted for about 3 years. So I was it was 2015, 2016, something like this. So
Mm-hmm.
this is where so about like 1 or 2 year 1 or 2 years before enlightenment. So my
Right.
biggest sort of people differ. Like so for some people, the dark night of the soul comes after enlightenment. For me, it was before. So if we define dark night of the soul as like the most difficult period on the
Mm-hmm.
journey, for me it was before. So for me it was this big depression with suicidal ideation, with lots of anxiety. This is actually when also I found psychedelics, and
Mm-hmm.
psychedelics actually helped me a lot to get me kind of out of that state.
Yeah.
And when I was already out of that state, this is where I said, okay, fuck it, I don't know what to do. I will just travel and have sex. And basically, there was this. I was after this depression and after some exposure to psychedelics, I was basically in the state where I wasn't as much interested in kind of financial success or something like this. I was just interested in having a good time and
Mm-hmm.
and and loving somebody, right? And of course, to me back then, it was very much intertwined with sex, as it often is, and especially in the male psyche. But still, the pull was towards love. The pull was towards uh, hugging and connecting and kind of learning to enjoy myself. I was not able before that, before I found psychedelics. Actually, it was incredibly difficult for me to dance without being self-conscious. It was difficult for me to enjoy myself. I was able to enjoy myself in sex, but when it comes to kind of human connection, it was still difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I was kind of going down and down this rabbit hole, and I was just traveling and meeting women. That's actually how I met my wife of 10 years now. So as I was going down this hole, I had a kind of a I started to have a premonition that I'm not going to live very long.
Whoa. Okay.
Well,
Interesting.
that's the
Yeah.
ego's premonition, right? That's
Yeah. Yeah.
because for the ego, enlightenment is death.
Yeah.
It's not the real death; it's an imaginary
Mm-hmm.
death. But
Mm-hmm.
but but that was the ego's
Mm-hmm.
premonition, and I
Mm-hmm.
and I basically got into a state where it has become very difficult for me to even like smoke weed, and I liked weed at the time, without getting some paranoia, without becoming fearful in a way, in one way or another. Because, psychedelics, they work kind of very much like meditation. They loosen the the egoic grip, and they get you closer and closer, of course, one must use them responsibly, which I didn't always. It's a separate conversation. But they kind of open you up slowly by loosening the resistance to having different experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was at the state back then when pretty much every time I would smoke weed, I would get paranoid, and I thought that I was just overdoing it, but even a little. So now I understand very well why it was the case. And so roughly around that time, I started to become interested in the topic of spiritual enlightenment because it felt like there was nothing else for me to do. It felt like it was the last thing to do. And I was never spiritual. I was never religious. I was always an atheist, which now I consider to be a blessing, actually, because there's much less spiritual bullshit to drop and much less religious dogma to drop. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to say that atheists don't have beliefs. I, of course, had tremendous amount of beliefs, but they have somewhat fewer philosophical beliefs. Most of my beliefs were about myself, about other people, about how I should be, about how other people should be,
Mm-hmm.
and they distorted my view of reality. Uh, but I at least didn't have to struggle too much with some spiritual beliefs
Mm-hmm.
or beliefs as
Religious. Yeah.
yeah, or religious beliefs as God as a kind of benevolent father figure or an abusive father
Mm-hmm.
figure, or something like that. I read some books about it. I read Jed McKenna's trilogy. I didn't understand it, so I didn't try to pretend that I did. I was always trying to be honest with myself. That's actually why it's kind of somewhat more difficult
Yeah, that's a
to
brilliant
be.
spiritual practice, as far as I'm concerned,
That
being
that's
ruthlessly honest with
That's absolutely
oneself.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I
Yeah.
think this is why it's somewhat difficult, actually, more difficult to be an atheist. I mean, the interesting statistics is that even though atheists are underrepresented in prisons, they're more likely to be depressed because you see you don't have this kind of ready explanation. So throughout the course of my life, and I know that you have a PhD in sociology, so throughout the course of my life, I've always been trying to figure out
Mm-hmm.
why people are so cruel, why
Yeah.
the society is so sick. I mean, now I know, but back then, I was always trying to figure out. So I read a lot about socialism, capitalism. So I mean, the Soviet Union also very bloody history of revolution. Then
Yeah.
this kind of system that they built turned out to be much worse than what the Western world ended up with. So I was reading Marx.
Marx, of
I was
course.
reading
Yeah.
Adam Smith. I was reading a lot of like thinkers, and then I moved to the U.S. And it is a much more humane society. But then I found out the ugly side of it. So I read
Yeah.
books like Nickel and Dimed, which is a very good book, and kind of and I after the euphoria of moving into the United States, kind of fell down a little bit. And I was in a privileged position. I was working at Google with a high salary, but I familiarized myself and I got exposed to the plight of the common worker or
Yeah.
minimum wage worker in the US and how inhumane the system is for them and how exploitative it is, and then they deal with the healthcare in the US and education. And so I very quickly realized that this is no paradise either. And so I've always tried to figure out why human beings build such cruel societies. I mean, that's kind of a price of being an atheist, I guess.
Right.
So because I've always been an atheist, I was never interested in spirituality. Basically, the very first thing that I uh, read about enlightenment was 3 months before it happened. So about three or 4 months before, because there was like nowhere left for me to go. This was the only thing that interested me. I read the Jed McKenna's book. I didn't try to pretend that I understood all of it. It scared me a little bit. which is normal. I mean, this is actually what he was going for. Uh,
Exactly. Yeah.
and and uh, uh, and then very unexpectedly, it happened on one of the uh, psytrance parties, basically. So I took some LSD, and for some reason it was well, now I know for what reason, but unexpectedly, let's put it this way, unexpectedly, the trip was extraordinary, scary. So I was very scared. I mean, it wasn't the most fear that I experienced. I experienced more fear on psychedelics afterwards, but at that time for me, it was probably this that it was the scariest trip that I had. And then at the end of it, I realized myself to be the infinity of creation, uh, uh, and I simply didn't come back from the trip. So the identification, so that's what I call self-realization nowadays. So the identification with the ego, with the persona, with the talker in my head was was broken
Mm-hmm.
forever. I never fluctuated out of this. At first I couldn't actually believe it. It was very strange. It was a very strange state of consciousness. So basically, as I was as I was uh, driving back home during that day, it felt like I was still on LSD. And
Mm-hmm.
then I got to sleep, and then I woke up, and I expected to come back to my kind of normal state of consciousness. But when I woke up the next day, it felt like I was still on LSD. So so
Right.
so 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 something that I thought I was no longer there, which is
Right.
actually why in the separatist state, LSD can be so enjoyable, because there's a temporary period where it loosens
Mm-hmm.
grip, it loosens control, and you don't identify with that voice, with that persona. So so and then I realized that that was it. Then I realized that this is actually what they were all talking about.
Right.
That there is no one there. That this persona that I imagined myself to be was actually not real. And uh and I never come back to identifying with it. But Uh, this is actually quite rare, from my understanding. Most people, and including most of my students, they jump back and forth. But there were two things that I now think of why it happened to me. And the first one is that I was 40 years old already at the time, so I was rather emotionally mature. I went through a lot of very, very difficult emotions. Uh, Depressions and divorces, and I had also struggled with very significant migraines. So like every in this in before enlightenment, so now I don't. So every like month or so, I would have an excruciating migraine with lots of pain and vomiting and things like that. So I had a lot of
Wow.
experiences.
So like an extreme case of it.
Extreme. Yeah,
Oh,
extreme with vomiting, and then I would vomit on empty stomach, which is actually a very, very difficult experience. So extreme amounts of pain. So I was kind of ready for pain, so to speak, ready for emotional pain. And then another thing is that when it happens like that, when you don't fluctuate back and forth, it's usually is very dramatic,
mm-hmm.
emotionally speaking. And so what followed afterwards was very emotionally dramatic. So I remember that when I realized that the identification with this persona, with this self-constructed persona that doesn't really exist, is the source of all suffering. I remember I was so angry and so overcome with grief that I threw a bottle of water on my kitchen floor, and I screamed, 40 years. So meaning that like even now as I remember it and I get a little bit emotional. So
Yeah.
meaning that 40 years I have struggled without because I did not understand it. Now, of course, my view on this is a little bit more kind of tempered. Back then, it thought I thought that this is the most important thing to understand. That only like if anybody understood that they are not the voice in their head, that they are not this
Mm-hmm.
persona
Mm-hmm.
that they created, that if everyone just got it, then we would have a society without suffering. But as I continued the path, and I was as most of my students actually, I was completely taken aback. I was completely shocked at the amount of emotional suppression that existed in me after not after, but during this time, you know, during this 40 years accumulated since very early childhood, and the depth of it. And I actually continue to use psychedelics, and every time I would use psychedelics, I would see more of it. So I would see more of the anger, more of the grief, more of the resentment, more of the fear. Every time it would be covered by fear, of course. And so my view on this is a little bit more tempered right now. In the beginning, it felt like this is just the only thing that needs to be understood. And
Yes.
as you could actually see in a lot of teachings
Yep.
nowadays, that
Yep.
this is the only thing that needs to be understood. Now I understand that the only thing that I did, the only reason that I did understand it back then is because I was emotionally ready, because I was emotionally mature enough, I was emotionally ready enough for the pain that would follow. And if the person is not if the resistance to experiencing the emotional suppression is still very high,
Mm-hmm.
this understanding is not going to happen, or it's going to happen as a glimpse, and
Yep.
you're going to be right back. So in the beginning, I thought that that's the most important understanding. Much later, as I continued to use psychedelics, I very quickly, within 1 or 2 years, understood that the path is mostly emotional. So it's mostly the path of emotional work, of uncovering the suppressed emotionality and the all the false beliefs that are supported by it. So like all false beliefs are supported by suppressed emotions that we didn't let ourselves experience. And and that's like 90% of the path. And so from that perspective, everything that I went through before the event, before self-realization, was just as important as what happens afterwards. And from
Yeah.
that perspective, the the self-realization, or what most people would call enlightenment. I'm actually quite strict with language. I use enlightenment for I reserve this term for another state of consciousness that comes much later. So I call this self-realization. But this event is only the beginning, right? So what needs investigation is our suffering, you know.
Yep. Yeah.
And so as I was investigating it deeper and deeper and deeper, it amazed me to what depth it goes, and the degree to which our emotional responses uh, are actually conditioned by the past, and the degree to which our emotional reactions uh, actually are coming from the past.
Yep.
So I'm not trying to say there is no kind of natural emotional reaction at all, but even in the self-realized state, uh, the emotional reaction oftentimes is like 90%. It's 90% of the suppressed emotion from the past, and 10% is a reaction to what's actually going on, right?
Yeah.
And so that is
Yeah.
why, after authentic self-realization, if there is abiding awareness, the suppressed emotionality, the suppressed pain, the denied pain from the past comes in waves. So, there's a wave of release. There's another wave of release, and it's a kind of slowly winding down. So in my case, I sort of poured the kerosene on the fire by using psychedelics. I continued to use psychedelics, and every time I would do that, there would be first fear, of course, and then it became quickly apparent to me that if we're talking about fear arising in meditation or in psychedelic trips, that it's the fear of inner experience, it's the fear of knowing yourself more, of seeing your wounds and traumas more, of understanding something more. It's the fear of resolving the past. And so there would be some fear, then there would be some anger, there would be some grief. I would cry every time, and so I continued to do this for years, and of course also I meditated, right? So after self-realization, I could not meditate. It would be
Mm-hmm.
absolutely impossible without any psychedelics. I would meditate for like 4 or 5 hours every day. And I also had, by the way, some experience with meditation. I meditated before that, but
Okay. Mm-hmm.
uh, I with my therapist actually introduced me to meditation. So I had some experience in meditation. I meditated like consistently for about 20, 30 minutes. I did some self-compassion meditation, but after that, meditation takes on a completely different form, right? So I would
Yeah.
I would, I would be meditating for like 2 or 3 hours and experiencing lots of fear and anger and unitive experiences and out of body experiences and a lot of grief and so many things. It just becomes a ride.
Mm-hmm.
So so afterwards, yes, absolutely. So afterwards, uh, I very quickly realized that all religions are about the same thing, and all religions were basically founded by a kind of garden variety enlightened person who tried to communicate the truth to the world. So I started I understood very deeply the kind of famous sayings of Jesus. I started looking at Buddhism, which even I was familiar with some sayings of Jesus, but I was not familiar with Buddhism before. I never even looked at it before, but I started looking at it, and I read up a bunch of things. And I found Osho. I didn't even know who Osho was before it. I also found Adyashanti. I didn't even know who Adyashanti was
Mm-hmm.
before it. And and I think I didn't read too much, but I read one book. I know that you like this book very much too. So I read Adyashanti's The End of Your World,
Mm-hmm.
which helped me to kind of normalize the experience, and it jived very well with whatever I was experiencing that
Yeah.
all of this complicated world of my relationship with people uh, supported by suppressed emotionality was of my own making, and I was living through the destruction of this world to end up inhabiting the real world. And and uh, and I also read Osho. I didn't read any particular book of Osho, but I read through sporadically. I read through his commentary on various topics, and Osho was also extremely profound. Uh, what helped me in Osho's writing is he's talking about aloneness, the complete aloneness, and how loneliness is transformed into aloneness. And also, Osho is one of the well, I do that too, but Osho is one of the few uh, popular spiritual teachers who speaks a lot about the ego.
Mm-hmm.
So I also in my work speak a lot about the ego, about how manipulative it is, about how deceitful it can be, and how it distorts reality and how it hides from oneself. So from that perspective, it was helpful. So even though many people, and myself included, understand the path on the intellectual level rather quickly,
Hmm.
But on the lived embodied level, it's a completely different journey. And it's a journey that takes many years.
Yep.
So it took me and it goes way, way deeper than most people realize. So like if speaking of psychedelics specifically, if somebody thinks that they're done, a very good test of that is for them to just take a very large dose of psychedelics and see what comes up. In the most cases, what would come up is actually a lot of suffering, a lot of misery, and fear, and anger, and tears, and grief. So it took me 8 years of continued practice with psychedelics and without them to arrive to a state of consciousness where a very large dose of a psychedelic would not, of LSD specifically, for example, would not create any hallucinations or much of emotional release. So I might cry for a little while, but other than that, I would experience no fear, no anger, and would remain completely functional and conversational.
Hmm.
So so I do believe this famous story of Ram Dass giving his teacher Neem Karoli Baba 1200 mics of LSD, and he didn't react at all. So I react. I'm very close to that. So I react somewhat. Like if I take 1200 mics of LSD, I might cry for about 5-7 minutes, but that's pretty much the end of it. So I do believe that actually that this story is true because it jives with my lived experience. And unfortunately, many teachers are kind of condescendingly dismissive of that story and of that of these claims. But it's true actually. I think from my perspective, what psychedelics do, and by the way, for the viewers, it's important to also note that I don't recommend doing that because, especially if you're awake, especially if you have realized it, it might be absolutely overwhelming. So please, they are an extraordinary effective tool, but they require respect. They require responsible usage. So please be very careful. It's very easy to overestimate yourself and overestimate how free from suffering you are, or your ability to experience intense emotions, and very easily get yourself into territory when it's just way too much. In my view, the way that they work is whatever suffering is still hidden, whatever suffering is still unconscious, they make it conscious, which is actually the function of awareness, if you think about
Hmm.
it. Like once the awareness is discovered, once it is found, its main function is not an escape or a refuge. I don't remember. You described it as something in the video that Drake that introduced us made a comment. You talk about how many people misinterpret and kind of hide in awareness, and how it becomes the kind of
A
soothing
landing
holding.
place or a
Yes,
hideout.
yes,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
yeah. But the true function of awareness is actually to continue to illuminate and make the unconscious suffering conscious, and make our unconscious patterns conscious. And the true function of awareness is not a place of identification, but the transformation of the individual, the transformation of the human. And it becomes really personal very, very fast.
Yeah.
You get, and that's also what psychedelics do, especially after self-realization. So nowhere to hide. They show the remaining ill will. They show the remaining insecurity. They just like awareness does in meditation. So also, by the way, from my perspective, meditation is the foundational practice. So don't I don't think it's wise to experiment with psychedelics without having established a consistent meditation practice. But they fundamentally do the same thing. They show uh, in ways in which you are still suffering, and the dysfunctional ways in which you try to cope with the suffering.
Oh
And
yeah.
the reason I use the word dysfunctional, not to be judgmental, but the ways that are not good for you. So
Mm-hmm.
not healthy ways, but
Mm-hmm.
ways in which you try to escape. And this goes really, really, really deep.
Oof. Yeah.
It's
Big
amazing. It's
time.
extraordinary. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also becomes very personal, and it becomes very humane,
Yeah.
extremely human. So that's why I love also what you're doing, and
Yeah.
I love even the name of the channel,
Thank you.
because it is about transformation of the individual. It is about the humanity of it all, the humanity of compassion, the humanity of anger towards that arises on the spiritual path
Mm-hmm.
as a result of past unprocessed mistreatment, the humanity of human connection, the humanity of ability to understand somebody rather than judge them. So it
Mm-hmm.
becomes a very human path. I once said that the mind is a crying child,
Yeah.
and that's what it is. And the awareness is the mother that
Yeah.
just gives the attention. It gives the loving attention to the crying child, but you cannot stop its tears. You cannot stop its anger. You cannot stop its tantrum. You can only hold it in love.
I, for whatever reason, really like the word illumination, as in,
Mm.
it really felt like every shift, because there were sort of several of main ones at my end here. Each shift sort of illuminated more,
Yeah.
so this is why I think this is another thing that people sort of, even someone reading my book, they were like completely shocked because they arrived to a particular shift in the book, and they assumed in themselves that this was like the end, like there was nothing's gonna come out. And then they open next chapter and he's like, boom, another batch of stuff is being illuminated. And it was really even great for them to see their own assumption
Yep.
of that end point, right? Where, there's an expectation that nothing else is gonna come up anymore, right?
Yep. Yep. Like the spiritual path is very interesting. It's going to destroy your every expectation about the future. I can only look back and
Hmm.
describe my experience back then, right? So when
Yeah.
I can say I can look back and I say I don't remember the last time I felt fear. I don't remember the last time I was angry. I don't remember the last time I experienced jealousy or something. I remember the last time I cried out of compassion. I still cry out of compassion on a weekly basis, let's say.
Hmm.
But I don't remember the last time I experienced ill will towards somebody. But still, this is still this is still an observation about the past. I still
Hmm.
can make no statements about
Claim.
the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
claim
Yeah.
about the future. So to whatever I will still experience, I will need to experience just like everybody else.
Yeah, exactly. I've just had that conversation recently that um you know everybody has who's been on this journey for quite some time, and by that I mean at least a few years, has
Yeah.
been humbled by life
Yes.
enough times,
Yes.
to basically not to not make that claim that one is done with anything, because you just never know,
Yeah.
and I certainly can speak for myself. I mean, there really was a point for a very long time where, again, if you had asked me at the time, is there anything coming up, has there been any emotional trigger or something like that, I would really have nothing to report on, because there just wasn't anything coming up anymore, um, and I can totally see how it would have been so easy then during that time to go, I'm done. I've seen it all, process it all. I arrived, quote unquote, which I wouldn't, by then I knew enough to know to not make those claims. And then, 2 years or however long that lasted, and there's basically a situation, and it triggers something that I sort of already, visited and seen, but there was almost like a layer to it that
Mhm.
was sort of only exposed through this particular experience, right? And maybe you can share your thoughts on, or your experience as far as suffering, because I also find that people find it really confusing. Is there an end to suffering? Isn't there an end of suffering?
Yeah.
And quite honestly, Artem, I'm not surprised, because this is where I'm glad that I didn't know much about awakening at all, because I can see how
Yeah.
when you
Yeah.
hear all these different takes, I don't know how people like don't like lose their mind sometimes, just by the sheer
Yeah.
amount of often like conflicting information, right? And so, can you share what that actually means for you, the end of suffering?
Okay. So yeah, there were three things in what you said that I would like to address. So I'll
Mm-hmm.
start with the first one, as you said, about like, claiming to be done and then being surprised. This happens very often. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually why I like psychedelics. Because just like situations in life can trigger you,
Mm-hmm.
in the awakened state, they will reliably show you more of your suffering,
Mm-hmm.
reliable, right? So it's actually once you are, I even wrote sometimes in my answer that like in the dream state, it's actually possible to have very nice psychedelic experiences. After abiding awakening, after true awakening, every trip will have the component of a bad trip. So every trip actually follows the same arc. There's some fear, then you see more into yourself, you see more into your suffering, you are exposed to more of the false beliefs. Then there's an emotional release, and then there's more relaxation, there is more unity, there's more equanimity. So they will not let you actually stagnate. And of course, I'm not like to each their own. I'm not saying there's everybody must use them. No, 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 not at all. But I also have to cheekily agree with Nim Karoli Baba, who said many saints would be afraid to take this. So, yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes, he said, in order to be not affected by it, your mind has to be firmly fixed on God. Others would be afraid to take. Many saints would be afraid to take this. So I kind of agree. It took me a very, very long time, an extraordinary amount of emotional release to not be affected by them much in large doses. So but life has a tendency to do the same,
Mm-hmm.
to put you into situations that illuminate and show more of your suffering. And from a certain perspective, the journey is never done. I think
Mm-hmm.
I think we can practically speak about done in retrospect. So if you've like, if you've been living for like, 5 years and nothing triggers you and there's no suffering and you tried psychedelics and they don't trigger you and like you can say that, okay, so I'm more or less done. But it's still not a guarantee that something will not come up in the future. There is no guarantee of the future at all. At all.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, uh, and then I also would like to touch on what you said about revisiting. I think this is very important. There is a confusion in many people that uh, experiencing some release about something means that it's never going to come up again. This is actually not true. So what happens is first you understand something on the intellectual level, and then you work the emotional material, so to speak, that we're
Mm-hmm.
supporting. the illusion, and it
Yeah.
comes in waves. So yes, the first wave may be the most intense, but then the second could be half that intense, and then the second could be half that intense. So it's a kind of process that, and the whole enlightenment process too, right? So we can say realization is the most, self-realization is the most intense time. So it goes like woo, intense, and then less and less and less and less and less, and it slowly dies down. So you can say that this part where it slowly dies down is the end of suffering. But but you see, it's a kind of a more of a practical, pragmatic statement than a absolute statement, because
Yeah.
even though it's very small, I mean, it could always go a little bit smaller. But I think from the practical perspective, you could pinpoint the time where your heart is so open that you rarely, if ever, experience ill will, anger, condescension, fear, or hurt feelings. At least in daily life. I think it's just that it lies much further down the road than most people assume. So speaking about the end of suffering, uh, most people define the end of suffering as the end of identification with the sufferer.
All right.
That already brings up a tremendous relief. So suffering is there, but I don't identify with it. Suffering is there, but I let it run through me. Right. This is already such a tremendous change of perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of trying to escape suffering, you allow it to dissolve it. You allow it to appear, and you give it love and attention, and it leaves you, and
Mm-hmm.
instead of trying to continuously running away from it. So from that perspective, the end of suffering is the end of seeking. So once you stopped seeking and you started embracing whatever comes, compared to the person who was seeking and always running away from it, you don't suffer any longer. But if we talk about the end of suffering in the strictest sense, then the end of suffering is the end of emotional disturbance. So the purification of the mind comes with deeper and deeper equanimity. You have noticed, I'm sure, in your own journey that things that used to bother you, emotionally speaking, and arise some emotional response or energetic response, some unpleasant response, some of those things don't bother you anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a continued process into that direction. And you could say that it's infinite. I think it's practical terms. There is a point where not much comes up anymore, or at least if it comes up, it doesn't disturb your life. Not to say that learning stops. Learning never stops. Learning
Yeah.
absolutely never stops.
But do you see how there's so much confusion
Yes.
around this and even what that
Yes.
means? Because I've
Yes.
learned through these conversations with different people on the channel that like for example, for many people, the end of suffering means literally no experience that one would define as negative experience, and then what that means for different people will mean different things. So like for basically no emotional upset, no sadness, no anger, no something like that. Let's call this, put it in a bag of the so-called negative emotions. So for many people the end of suffering is going to be that. For other people, like you said, it's the end of the sufferer, right? Which doesn't deny whatever that suffering means to whatever person. So, I have to tell you that I did talk about it in the book, but I still have trouble conveying what that even means.
You see, enlightenment is a very paradoxical journey. Yes, strictly speaking, if we want to be very strict, then the end of suffering is the end of any negative experience that is not coming from what is happening right now, but is coming from the past. That is coming from the past wound.
Hmm.
If we're
Hmm.
speaking very strictly, is it possible? It is possible. It takes way more practice and way longer time and much more emotional release than most people assume. but it is possible. I can confirm it with my own experience. Also, I think psychedelics are a great test for that, and just any kind of difficult interaction with another person. It's not complete lack of reaction. Uh, because emotions are there for a reason. If you hit me, I will become very angry. Of course, if something happens, if
Mm-hmm.
somebody that I love dies, I will be crying. Of
Yep.
course, right? But we can talk about it this way. It's the end of exaggeration of the emotional reaction from the unresolved wounds of the past.
Right. That
So,
makes sense. Yeah.
but in order to get there, you must absolutely never reject it, right? So in order to get it, it's a paradox. You see, have you noticed that for as long as you reject something, for as long as you deny it, it is very stubborn. But once you accept it and you experience it, it kind of goes away on its own, right? So something very very similar happens with the whole process of this journey. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
yes, there is a point where you could describe things are like that, but the journey there is through acceptance. The healing journey is always through accepting the wound and through allowing the emotional response that it creates.
Mm-hmm.
And then you revisit, 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 and it gets slower and less and less and less and less painful with time as also your behavior changes. And your behavior is not instructed by this wound as much as before. You see?
Yeah, and I think that this is where I think language sort of becomes
Yeah.
limited because there was a point in the journey where I could speak of what felt like a mechanism that was accepting or not accepting something, leaning in or not
Right. And
leaning
you
in
you
or
no longer
resisting,
can. Yeah, yeah.
right?
You
And
no
and
longer
and
can. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. So
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah. I understand.
mechanism
Yeah, yeah.
alone
It's gone.
is
Yeah.
sort of, it's gone, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's simply what is. So it's
Yeah.
not, there's no kind of a
Yeah.
choice appearing where I can accept what's happening or not or leaning
Right.
in, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
this
that's
is
right.
one
That's right.
thing where I
Yeah.
feel that's where it's so hard to convey this bit. And then the
Yeah.
other bit, which it sort of connects to what we spoke about earlier, which is, for example, if someone lives, in a relative isolation, right?
Yep.
Had all those, we're talking liberation, we're talking as far as we know the person can quote unquote get to, right? But if they live in a relative isolation and they're on top of that, they're surrounded only by people who basically look up to them
Yep.
or agree with them,
Yep.
never ever question anything, only look
Yep.
with adoring eyes. And that's literally the only thing you know. You never actually are exposed in any other way to life, to different dynamics, different people, different situations. Right there, how can you possibly know, right? If you are
You
in
know
this
many.
kind of scenario that you have nothing else that comes up anymore,
Do
right?
you know many people like that?
Sorry.
Do you know many people like that?
I'm sure that those kinds of people definitely exist.
Yes, this is actually a very apt observation, and I completely agree with you. Yes, I mean,
Hmm.
uh, uh, this is a danger. Yes, so if you live in a relative isolation and you only surround yourself with your students, you only surround yourself with followers, you never speak to kind of more difficult people, you kind of renounce the worldly life, then it's
Hmm.
actually very easy to fool yourself. It's
Totally.
actually extremely, extremely easy
Hmm.
to fool yourself. So enlightenment is not actually living as a hermit. It's a complete embrace of all aspects of life. And that is why I like very much what Ram Dass said. If you think you're enlightened, come and spend a couple of weeks with your parents because your parents are not going to view you as enlightened. They're going to view you as their child, and in whatever ways they still think of themselves superior than you, or smarter than you, or more experienced than you, it's going to trigger whatever wounds it created in you in the first place.
Hmm. Hmm.
From my perspective. psychedelics are actually even a more objective and stronger test because to me, when it was already rather effortless from the suffering perspective for me to be socializing with my parents, psychedelics were still difficult, you know. Uh,
Hmm.
so, uh, so I think there is definitely danger, and uh, what you described is actually very important. So I am actually, to be really honest with you, I am actually fairly disappointed and fairly critical of the contemporary spiritual marketplace, precisely for the reason because teachers don't speak to each other,
Hmm.
they don't challenge each other, they don't spend a lot of time in each other's presence. And when you, as you said, surround yourself only with people who look up to you, it's very easy to preserve the remaining blind spots. So that's why I actually love what you're doing, and you're inviting other people on the channel. I also try to invite other teachers in my channel. I think that there's a lot of benefit to be had from teachers being exposed to each other and spending time in each other's presence. Uh,
Hmm.
just like going and visiting their parents for a week, or maybe dropping acid from time to time, not to kind of get complacent and see and think that all of their suffering has been eliminated.
Yeah. I think,
Because
for
what
me, so go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I also wanted to make the important point because the extent to which we still suffer is also the extent to which we misperceive. Because all suffering is connected to misperceiving oneself, and all misperceiving oneself is connected to misperceiving others. Because you remember how we spoke that it's all about radical honesty, right? And
Hmm. Hmm.
clearing away of self-deceit. So in order to be in some sort of a uh, uh, self-deceit about yourself or about your true motivations or about what you're trying to do, you actually need to construct a mirror image. You actually need to misperceive another person also,
Hmm.
right? And in the context of teaching, that's actually very dangerous because whatever suffering still remains in the teacher, it would also influence their perception of the student and would influence the quality of their advice.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's interesting because, I actually, what I noticed when I fast, because I kind of started on exploring the spiritual scene sort of afterwards, and as I was like just seeing what's out there, and and I was actually amazed how much rigid dogma there
Yeah,
was that I didn't realize, like, you
tremendous.
know and me with my literally embarrassingly tiniest knowledge of Buddhism, I knew enough to know that, if Buddha ever even said that, but that to not mistake the finger pointing at the moon for the moon. And yet it really just, the whole thing just sounded to me like everybody just fixates on the finger pointing,
Yeah,
and like completely missing out the whole thing. So this was both really surprising. First of all, it was quite shocking, I have to say, and
yeah,
very heartbreaking,
yes.
because
Same here.
because I could see how, with that rigidity, especially around that the only way and this is the only correct way, all
Mm,
that discourse in the first place, that people just suffer unnecessarily just because those things
mm,
are presented that way, because they
yes.
buy into this idea that they then do something wrong, that there is a right way to do
Yes.
this awakening, rather than, and then the thing that I find the most heartbreaking is that they stop trusting the intelligence of their own process, like
Mhm.
they, you know what I mean, like and that, I don't know, can you speak to it, because you are a teacher, you actually have students, so can you talk a little bit about that, and have you seen that happen a lot as well? And
Oh, I mean, Absolutely. I mean, you said it already. I will just add a little bit, but you are completely right. I mean, it is heartbreaking, and not only in ways that are dogmatic,
Hmm.
but also the inability to what I saw a lot is the inability to relate on the human level,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
inability to understand, to offer compassion, to offer understanding and compassion, uh, or being, unnecessarily harsh and cruel to those people who lash out in their suffering, for example, you see. And in some levels, it like from my current perspective, in some levels, it reaches the point to which I would say that's just narcissistic abuse. So I think that this is all extremely sad, and it was very difficult for me also to make my peace with that. So I would say
Hmm.
that those were one of my deepest tears. So I cried about it many, many times, and it was probably one of the most difficult things for me to actually make peace with, to basically stop suffering about it, to accept that this is
Yes,
what's
yes,
happening.
yes.
Uh, it was tremendous amount of grief for the reason, and I think that the reason is because whatever mistreatment or abuse is being done in the spiritual world from the position of the spiritual authority, it's done in the name of love. So all the right words are being said about unconditional love, but the behavior is not at all unconditional loving. And that's
Hmm.
actually what constitutes abuse, actually. If you really think about what abuse is when I mistreat you and then I tell you this is for your own good.
Yeah, gaslighting and
This
yeah,
is love.
deflecting and then deflecting. I've had that conversation recently with someone, but and I'm not. And by the way, I don't want to say that I have absolutely nothing against communities. I see very much there's beauty in coming together, and there's a whole other really wonderful side to it. But I'm just saying, in a sense where, based on the stories of people who've had been, for years in those communities and what they've been through, I mean, the amount of gaslighting that goes on, the amount of just undermining people's just basic human experience, where they are afraid to just say very honestly,
Yeah,
basically, how they feel. I mean, we're talking basics. I'm not even talking anything. Forget about the
yeah,
spiritual bit or anything to do with awakening, just like the basics of just honesty. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, this is extremely widespread. So I have seen spiritual communities that are very abusive. I've seen communities that are toxically positive, which harshly reject any expression of suffering or negativity or
There's that.
anger.
Yep.
This
Yep.
is this is this is extremely can be extremely damaging. I have been on the receiving end of, so
Mm-hmm.
to speak, spiritual abuse from even from some people that you wouldn't expect it from.
Yeah.
I'm not going to name any names. So it's very widespread, and it's actually one of the reasons that I run my own community because I wanted to create something different.
Mm-hmm.
So in my community, first of all, there is wide acceptance of all different methods. I don't push anybody to use psychedelics if they don't want to. Psychedelics and meditation works similarly. All the other there could be other somatic methods of practice of
Mm-hmm.
radical honesty. There are tons of practice. So there's a wide acceptance of any practice. There's no prejudice against uh, specific background, specific spiritual background,
Yeah.
and there is also we focus on honesty and developing the ability to relate to another person, understand another person, even if they're hurting, even if they're saying mean words, about somebody, right?
Hmm.
E- the we focus on creating the atmosphere of understanding and connection because ultimately this is what heals. It's always the connection that heals. We always seek and yearn for understanding. Yes, ultimately we yearn for our own understanding of
Hmm.
ourselves. And ultimately we yearn for self-love. But in the context of relationship with others, it's not about specific forms of behavior. Many communities create their own codes of behavior.
It's like
And
a new identity, a whole new
exactly,
identity.
in new
Yeah.
identity. And
Yeah.
then just like with all other identities, what tends to happen is that once you violate the code of behavior, you get judged
Hmm.
or pathologized. And the spiritual language gets weaponized and people start saying to each other, oh, you're just not seeing it yet. You don't have acceptance. And then when they dump somebody, they say things like, I let you go. It's all this spiritual mask.
Yeah.
We actually don't use a lot. We don't use spiritual language in our community. We use normal, everyday language. I'm feeling angry. I'm so upset.
Mm.
I'm crying right now. I need some help. Um, so we focus on opening our hearts to each other, which is the
Yeah.
same as opening one's heart to oneself, or through opening one's heart to oneself, learning to open our hearts to
Yeah.
other people. And that's why, I have a lot of students that come. Actually, interestingly, I don't have many seekers. Most of my students are not seekers. Most of my students are people who have had a realization or a glimpse or have an abiding
Hmm.
realization. And I help them through this very painful, as you know from your experience, process of deconditioning, process of emotional
Yeah.
release. And this can be a very emotional and difficult
Oh,
process.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
and a lot of people, quite a significant amount of people in my community, they come from other spiritual communities that they became disappointed and they feel that this is a breath of fresh air. So this is a place where authentic expression is welcomed, honesty is welcomed, understanding and compassion are the highest values, and not some sort of conformity to a spiritual ideal. There is no ideal.
Yeah. I had a very limited experience of being in, I wouldn't maybe even call it a community, just basically gathering with a teacher for a couple of months, 2, 3 months, I think. It was all online, actually. It wasn't even in person. But gosh, if I will be forever grateful for that experience, you see. But the reason why I enjoyed it was because there was none of the stuff that we talked about. There was no dogma, there was complete recognition for the different paths. And
Yeah.
that even certain teacher may be not a great teacher for now, but maybe a great
Yep.
teacher for later, right?
Of
Because
course.
even that
Yeah.
changes. Or
Yeah.
a specific focus in teachings will be suitable for this
Yep.
point in a journey, but not suitable for another one. So even
Okay.
that changes within like one person's journey, let alone,
This
for
is this
other people, right?
is absolutely
But
true.
yeah, and so to me those are the kinds of things that I so appreciate, and I know for the fact that if I ended up in with this group of people and any of that kind of stuff would be happening, like I've just described, I'd be out of there like in 5 minutes because I just, I've been sort of allergic to dogma since I was a kid, you know.
Good for you.
Um,
Good for you. Unfortunately, a lot of people get hooked and spend
yeah,
quite a lot of time, and then they get disappointed, and oftentimes they get disappointed in spirituality, but sometimes
yeah,
they find another teacher. Yeah, but this is an extremely personal path,
yep.
extremely personal path. And as I say to my students, it's completely normal to have multiple teachers. It's
Mm-hmm.
completely normal to outgrow a teacher,
Yep.
actually. And then
Yep.
ultimately you become your own teacher, and ultimately the whole world, everybody becomes your teacher. Ultimately,
Yep.
every interaction can show you something about yourself. Every interaction can help you open your heart deeper. There's also this phenomena you see, because the path is so long, and because the self-realization is just disidentification from the ego, but it's dissolutions. its true dissolution happens over the course of decades. It takes at least 10 years, and depending on how intensely you practice, it can take much longer. Uh, be- be- because of that, there's this phenomenon of when you are in the midst of this process or relatively early in this process, the people that you can help most are people who were like you.
Mm-hmm.
So whose like egoic composition was similar to yours.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the people that you mostly understand. The people who were the opposite of you, usually in the dream state, also were the source of your pain. So it's very easy, like when such a person comes to you as a student, it's very easy to actually misdirect the remaining pain and think that they're bad, abusive, and abuse them further, and not be able to give them good advice, while at the same time being able to give good advice to people who were psychologically more like you. So
Mm-hmm.
that's you see why for somebody it could be bad actually to interact with this teacher, but for somebody else it could be good. And the deeper we go, and the more we dissolve the ego, the more the ability to help different people psychologically, again also with experience, but the emotional ability to help different people psychologically, it also starts to manifest.
Yeah. Which is why maturity, is one of my favorite words, when it comes to that, just a good old, maturity,
Yeah,
especially if someone is in a position of a teacher. I mean,
absolutely.
the magnifying glass should be there at all times, in my view, because, like I said, I've seen enough times the ability of this human mind to delude oneself,
Oh yes. Oh
and
yes.
so the blind spots are called blind spots for a reason. And so I think that it's almost to me a case of then, like real responsibility, when especially if someone, assumes that role to be kind of vigilant around certain things.
Yes, yes. Most definitely. And I have been teaching for about 5 or 6 years now. I mean, I started teaching relatively late into the process, but even then, I have made mistakes. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, but thank you for saying that, because believe me that there are some people that wouldn't have admitted that. And I think
Yeah.
that teaching, I'm assuming that the teaching journey in and of itself is a journey of just
Of
learning
course.
pretty much
Yes.
every day, right?
Yes. If you're a teacher and you're not learning and you think that you know all of that and you know the minds of your students better than them, this is a very dangerous delusion. Yeah,
Yeah.
you absolutely learning. You're still learning to the extent that the suffering still exists in your unconscious. You're learning. You're even if it's very small, you're still learning the kind of small biases which kind of make you jump to conclusion a little bit, or
Mm-hmm.
treat some people with kind of less understanding and compassion than others. And again, it usually, as I said previously, connected to this
Right.
observation, it
Yes.
usually boils down to how you were and what kind of people hurt you, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
would tend to
Mm-hmm.
be more harsh and less compassionate to people that
Right.
remind you of the archetypes that were painful for your psyche before,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and also kind of it's oftentimes surprising if you really take the time to listen and understand another human being, the things which you kind of did not correctly perceive. Sometimes it's not like that at all because sometimes it's just egoic defense mechanisms, and then kind of we have a misunderstanding, and
Mm-hmm.
I take the time and I listen to another person for like a very long time, and I understand that nope. Yep, he's just lying to himself. There's nothing there that I'm not actually seeing. But sometimes it's very surprising. And once you really take the time and open the heart and understand another person, you start treating them differently, and this is always a humbling experience, even if it's not emotionally painful, but it's an
Yeah.
important experience to keep opening one's heart. it's very important for a teacher to be open-hearted. It's the most important thing. There is nothing rare and nothing more impactful than an open heart,
Hmm.
an open, compassionate heart that does not judge, that understands. That is by itself a tremendously healing force because it gives the person a permission to apply the same understanding and the same non-judgment to oneself. It shows them that
Hmm.
it's possible, and it also serves as a permission.
Right. And I think that that kind of compassion sort of is just a natural byproduct of meeting our own pain, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it's not something you can manufacture,
Pre-
you know?
Precisely. Yes. Yes, it's not something that you can manufacture. You can play this role. You can pretend to be that.
I mean, you can, but
And true, if it's authentic, I even said one time to my students, I wrote, all my compassion comes from experience. If I understand you, then it means that if I truly understand you, then it means that at a certain time I experienced something like that.
Mhm. I just wanted to ask you, as far as um, what you do,
Hmm.
can you tell us a little bit more about what kind of things do you offer? Is it retreats? Is it one-on-one? How do you work, basically?
Yes. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I also wanted to say that I very much enjoyed the conversation. I enjoyed your questions. I enjoyed your comments. It was a pleasure and very delightful for me. So thank you. I really appreciate it. And in terms of what we do, so I do a few things. So first of all, I have a large collection of my writings on the topic of spiritual awakening on my website. I mean, some of them are a bit tricky, some of them are somewhat outdated. I would write them differently uh, right now, but I would say that it's still quite impactful. So if you, especially if you read them meditatively, they're designed to kind of poke you
Mm-hmm.
in the place. I wrote them in 2019, most of them. So I run a Discord community, which everybody is welcome to join. We already spoke about this community. It's a wonderful community, in my opinion, very rare. And I do free public YouTube satsangs every 2 weeks on my channel. It's
Mm-hmm.
called The Way of Truth, so everybody can come and speak, uh, preferably on video, and I will answer questions and give guidance to the best of my ability. Um, I will also soon start doing private satsangs in the Discord community that will not be recorded, where we do more of the emotional work. I do one-on-one sessions with people where we do mostly emotional work, mostly the shadow work.
Right.
You know, it can get very emotionally intense and very touching. So you can schedule one-on-one meetings with me on the website. Uh, by far the most pleasurable, the most treasured and joyful thing that I do is I do in-person retreats.
Mm-hmm.
We call them intensive integration retreats. We do a bunch of quite unique workshops, and we also do meditations, and we do one-on-one conversations there and group workshops. Very touching for a lot of people. It's an extraordinary transformative experience. Many people
I
say that it's the
bet.
most transformative experience of their life. The physical presence, first of all, the physical presence is very important. And then just being in the community where you're not judged and you can express yourself, express your pain, your anger, your tears, your struggle in
Mm-hmm.
an understanding way. There's also, of course, meditations and other exercises we do. Eye contact exercises where there's a prolonged eye contact. So many people begin to cry even from that. So those are beautiful gatherings, usually for about 3 or 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
Almost everybody, I would say, like 98% of people cry and feel much lighter and very transformed after the experience. And we do them right now. We do them twice a year. As our community grows, we will do them more frequently. The next one is going to be in mid-May in Northern California. And I live in Northern California in the United States. I live in Redwood City, and I also see visitors in my home. So if you wish to come see me and talk about your journey, explore your psyche, or just pick my brain for advice on different methods of practice, I would be happy to see you. I also, by the way, also support people over WhatsApp, text and video and
Oh, okay.
so I do a whole bunch of things.
You're busy, in other words.
Yes, yes. So I do a lot of things. But my community, even though I have a kind of different offerings, and we also plan to. And also on my YouTube channel, there are some long form
Hmm.
lectures. So there are satsangs, they all recorded. We already did 70 of them, 69 to be exact. But we also have long-term talks from my retreats that people find moving. So uh, people are welcome to check it out. But I also have to say that even though we do a lot of stuff, my community is still rather small. So I'm still at this point, even though I've been teaching for about 5 or 6 years, I'm nothing like Adyashanti or like Tole or
Hmm. Hmm.
Angela with regards to the size of the audience. So I'm fairly easily accessible. So if you are interested in working with me and you contact me, chances are you will hear from me. And it's easy. It's still at this point very easy to schedule a meeting with me.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'll be more than happy to direct people to your website and all your different offerings. I, for one, actually, I must say, I've always preferred smaller, gatherings. It's kind of more intimate and I don't know, but that's just, everybody's different.
No,
Everybody has
no,
their,
me too, because for really intimate, intense emotional work, I would say that's a requirement. Our retreats are anywhere from 12 to 13, 14 people.
yeah.
Mm.
And I also want to add that I recommend Artem's YouTube channel because there are really great conversations there, including the ones that I mentioned at the start with Frank Yang, which is how I learned about it. Because obviously, Artem is one of those people where we could have gone into like multiple avenues when it comes to this journey. We ended up talking
Yep.
about all kinds of things today that some people might not be interested in, prefer other topics. Then there's always Artem's channel where you can explore him talking about all kinds of things as well with his guests. So yeah, Artem, thank you so much for your time.
Of course, it was my pleasure. Thank you, Maggie, for having me. I enjoyed it a lot, and I would be very happy to do it again in the future.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Take care. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you, Maggie. Bye bye.